A shocking story that will make you reconsider the limits of justice. A 13-year-old girl is accused of the brutal murder of her own father. Her mother seeks to disinherit her daughter, calling her a cold-blooded killer. But behind the terrible crime lies a terrible truth: years of domestic violence and fear. This is a court drama where not only the inheritance is at stake, but also the child's right to life itself. Was it brutal revenge or a desperate attempt to survive? It's up to you. Chapter 1. Before the Storm. The hum of voices filled the Fulton County courtroom in Atlanta, Georgia. People whispered, reporters jotted down notes, and lawyers flipped through cases, checking documents at the last moment before the hearing began. The lamps under the high ceiling cast a cold light on the wooden floor, creating harsh shadows on the faces of those present. 13-year-old Anastasia Marshall sat on the first bench for the defendants. Small, frail, she looked even more vulnerable in a baggy light gray sweater that seemed deliberately chosen to hide her thinness. The long brown hair is neatly combed, but the expression of alertness and tension has frozen on the face. She did not raise her eyes, only mechanically clenched and unclenched her fingers, as if trying to distract herself from fear. Her mother, Olivia Marshall, was sitting apart, a little further away. She openly avoided her daughter's gaze, her thin lips pursed and her hands firmly folded in her lap. Her dark green dress looked neat, but her eyes showed weariness. These were the eyes of a woman who had made a decision and was now forced to live with it. She knew that this trial would change everything, but would it be in her favor? Sarah Thompson, the younger sister of George Marshall, Anastasia's late father, sat for the defense. She was the complete opposite of Olivia, a strong, composed woman with a determined expression on her face. Her strict suit gave her authority, and there was fire in her eyes. She's not here to watch. She came to fight. Suddenly, the door to the hall opened, and the bailiff announced in a loud voice, "I ask everyone to stand up. Judge Margaret Williams enters the courtroom." The hall instantly fell silent. Anastasia held her breath as the austere, robed woman took her place behind the high lectern. The judge looked around the room, nodded briefly, and spoke. Case number 24376, Olivia Marshall versus Anastasia Marshall. The plaintiff requests to recognize the defendant as an unworthy heir. We begin the hearing. At this moment, the silence in the hall became almost palpable. Everyone held their breath because they knew that a shocking story was waiting for them. Chapter 2. Accusation. She will remain a murderer. Judge Williams looked around the room expectantly, allowing everyone to appreciate the weight of the moment. Then she turned her gaze to the plaintiff. "Miss Marshall, you're first. You have a word." Olivia Marshall clasped her hands in her lap, took a deep breath, and stood up. She didn't seem excited, rather cold and determined. There were no tears in her eyes, only firmness. "Your Honor," she began in an even voice, "I came here to seek justice. I am asking that my daughter, Anastasia Marshall, be deprived of any rights to her father's estate. She is a killer." There was a muffled whisper in the hall. The judge looked up. Silence in the hall. Olivia pretended not to notice the reaction. She turned to the judge. "I know that according to the law, she will not be punished for her act because she is only 13. But this does not change the fact. She took an axe and killed her own father in cold blood, and now she wants to get his property. This is unthinkable. If she was 14, she would be in prison. How can such a person be allowed to inherit?" Her voice was full of emotion, but it did not contain the pain of a mother who had lost her husband. Only hard, relentless determination. Anastasia's defense attorney, Sarah Thompson, stepped forward, preparing to object, but the judge gave her a warning gesture. "Miss Marshall, are you saying your daughter committed murder?" Olivia swallowed nervously. "That's right. But she was a child who was beaten by her own father. You yourself have repeatedly confirmed this to your friends and neighbors, haven't you?" The judge tilted her head slightly, observing the expression on the woman's face. Olivia pursed her lips tighter and then answered sharply. "He was strict. He brought her up properly. Yes, there were quarrels, but everyone has family problems. This does not mean that she had the right to such a cruel act." The hall froze. Anastasia sat motionless, only her hands trembled a little on her knees. She did not respond to her mother's words, did not raise her eyes, as if trying to distance herself from everything that was happening. "Thank you, Miss Marshall," the judge finally said. "The defense side will get the floor after discussing the evidence. Please submit all materials." From that moment, it became clear that the process was gaining momentum. Chapter 3. Defense. She's just a child. Sarah Thompson sighed and stood up. Her movements were calm, but determination burned in her eyes. She knew that every word spoken now would be crucial. She didn't just fight for Anastasia, she defended justice. "Your Honor," her voice was even but firm. "Mrs. Marshall paints her daughter as a cold-blooded killer, but let's look at the real picture." She paused, looked around the room, and continued. "Anastasia Marshall is a 13-year-old child who lived in constant fear. Your Honor, I have official testimony from neighbors and school teachers who repeatedly noticed the marks of beatings on her mother's body. I also file police reports about calls to their house because of violence. But the most important thing is that I asked the court to listen to Anastasia herself." She turned to the girl, who was sitting with her head down. Sarah gave her a gentle nod. "Anastasia, tell the court what happened that evening." The hall fell silent. The girl slowly raised her head. Her eyes glistened with suppressed tears, but her voice was clear. "That evening, Dad came drunk, as usual. He began to shout at his mother, saying that she was worthless. Then he threw a plate at her. It smashed against the wall. Mom tried to say something, but he hit her. She fell. She fell silent, as if terrible events were scrolling before her eyes again. "Chew on," Sarah said softly. Anastasia clucked. "He said that she ruined his life, that she should disappear." Mom ran out of the house. He turned to me, grabbed me by the arm, pulled me into a corner, and told me I was as useless as she was, that I should disappear too. Then he raised his hand to strike me, but there was an axe lying next to him. I just made it first." There was a deep silence in the hall. Even Olivia Marshall was at a loss for words. Sarah looked at the judge. "Your Honor, this child is not a criminal. She defended herself. She was afraid for her life. Is it possible to punish her for this?" Judge Williams looked thoughtfully at the girl, then said, "The court takes into account these testimonies. We move on to the next part of the hearing." Sarah sat down, knowing she had done her best. But will it be enough? Chapter 4. Anastasia's testimony. "I did not want to kill." Anastasia sat in silence while everyone in the hall looked at her. The feeling was unbearable, as if hundreds of eyes were piercing her through and through. Judge Williams looked carefully at the girl and spoke calmly, without judgment. "Anastasia, I know that it is not easy for you, but we want to hear you. Are you ready to tell me what happened that night?" The girl licked her dry lips. Her fingers gripped the edge of the chair convulsively. She gulped and nodded slowly. Her voice was quiet but confident. "I never wanted everything to happen like this." She turned her gaze to her mother. Olivia Marshall sat motionless, her face still stony, but there was something more in her eyes, a mixture of pain, fear, and perhaps shame. "He came home drunk again that night," Anastasia continued, her voice shaking. "I knew what it meant. We all knew. He began to shout at his mother, saying that she was ungrateful, that because of her he did not become what he wanted. She was silent, tried to calm him down, but he pushed her. She hit the wall. Anastasia fell silent, as if she was reliving that moment. He grabbed her by the hair and began to drag her to the kitchen. I screamed, begged him to stop, but he didn't even look at me. I don't know where I got the courage, but I grabbed his hand. He looked at me, and then I saw rage in his eyes. She fell silent, her fingers digging into the fabric of her sweater. Sarah Thompson leaned forward slightly, her eyes radiating support. He pushed me so hard that I hit the floor. I remember the sound of his voice, low, angry. He said that if I don't get off the hook, I'll be next. The courtroom held its breath. Even the judge didn't make a single move, listening to the girl's every word. I saw an axe standing near the stove. It was always there. We used it to chop wood. He took a step towards me, and I knew I only had 1 second. I grabbed her and punched her. Once. I didn't want to. I just wanted him to stop. Her voice trembled, and tears streamed down her cheeks. She looked up at the judge, as if looking for an explanation. I didn't want to kill. I just wanted him to stop it. Judge Williams nodded slowly. Thank you, Anastasia. I know how hard it was to tell you. She turned her gaze to the prosecutor and the lawyer. The court takes into account these testimonies. Let's move on to the next stage of the hearing. Anastasia exhaled, her shoulders slumped, as if she had finally released the weight she had been carrying all this time. But will this be enough for the court to understand her truth? Chapter 5. Verdict. Truth is on her side. The courtroom froze in anticipation. Anastasia's last testimony hung in the air, forcing everyone present to reconsider their own attitude to this case. Judge Williams slowly flipped through the papers in front of her, her face impenetrable. She looked up and finally spoke. The court takes a break for the meeting. I ask everyone to stay in place. With these words, she got up, going to the conference room. The tension in the hall reached its peak. Sarah Thompson touched Anastasia's shoulder, trying to encourage her. Everything will be fine, she said quietly. The girl nodded, but there was still fear in her eyes. Olivia Marshall sat motionless, her fingers nervously clutching the hem of her dress. She did not look at her daughter, only stared intently into the void in front of her. 10 minutes passed, but they seemed like an eternity. Finally, the door opened again, and the judge returned to her seat. I ask everyone to stand up, came the voice of the bailiff. Judge Williams took a deep breath and turned her gaze to Anastasia. The court considered all the testimony and evidence in this case. We are dealing with an extremely complex situation that goes beyond the scope of ordinary probate proceedings. Your Honor, she turned her gaze to Olivia Marshall, you charge your daughter with murder, but the evidence presented clearly indicates otherwise. Anastasia's actions were not the result of malicious intent, but a desperate attempt to protect herself and her mother. Olivia sighed, but said nothing. The judge continued. According to the legislation, persons who intentionally committed a crime against the testator cannot inherit property. However, in this case, the investigation proved that Anastasia acted in a state of affect. She had no intention of killing. She was just defending herself. Therefore, the court makes a decision to reject the claim of the plaintiff, Olivia Marshall. Anastasia Marshall is fully entitled to her father's inheritance. The hall erupted in whispers. Sarah Thompson felt her shoulders slump in relief. She squeezed Anastasia's hand tightly. You are strong, girl. This is your victory. Anastasia finally raised her head. For the first time in a long time, a glimmer of hope flashed in her eyes. She knew that this was only the beginning of her new life, but at least now she had a chance for a future. Judge Williams made a closing gesture. The court is closed. And what do you think? Was the judge's verdict fair? Write your thoughts in the comments below the video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next crazier thing.